Hello and welcome to episode 13 of Global Conversations. My name is Nick.
And I'm Amanda. Today on Around the World in 10 Minutes, we examine the controversies surrounding the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, followed by Madagascar bracing itself for a possible epidemic of the plague.
Later in the podcast, we bring you a discussion with Master of Global Affairs student Martina Taverna on nonviolent resistance in Palestine, followed by an interview with Ali Alfoneh on Iran's nuclear weapons program. Now on to the first story. I love soccer, and I'm in good company. It's truly a global language that unites us all. The World Cup presents an opportunity to examine important trends in global affairs. One such trend is the skirting of standards in the name of growth. With the spotlight on Qatar's 2022 World Cup, we see how emerging markets harness FIFA to showcase their growth and influence. But hosting the event raises plenty of concerns like corruption and human rights abuses. In 2010, FIFA unexpectedly awarded the small emirate state the rights to host the globe's top sporting tournament. Small in land and in population, Qatar is not known for its soccer pedigree. So why Qatar? Well, thanks to their vast wealth, Qatar was able to lobby support from voting members before the official bidding process began, sponsoring events around the world. Qatar's FIFA rep was also publicly trading votes with other countries bidding for the 2018 World Cup. Helping each other out is not a new concept. As my Nona says, one hand washes the other, they both wash your face. But the Qatar crossed the line between lobbying and bribery. One of FIFA's executive committee members, who voted in favor of Qatar's bid, recently sold land in Cyprus worth €32 million to Qatar's sovereign wealth fund. Another 3 Qatar voting committee members have already left FIFA under corruption speculation. Emerging states like Qatar and Brazil use these massive sporting events as window showcases for their growing statures. The troubling question is, however, are the outcomes worth the budget? While hosting tournaments can produce some internal backlash, emerging states believe it is in their best interest to host such expensive spectacles. Using their vast wealth for a long-term vision, Qatar will use the World Cup to represent the region's tremendous growth and development, enticing more people to their country. If FIFA is pursuing a global audience for the world's game, expanding to new markets like Qatar are great. But should expansion into new markets circumvent ethical standards like corruption and human rights? It's a great case to examine global concepts and trends, and it shows that soccer is a global conversation.
And now for our second story. In a country still reeling from the effects of a ruthless famine, drought, locust infestation, and a cyclone, the African island of Madagascar faces an even more alarming threat, the Black Death. The Black Death, or bubonic plague, ravaged Europe in the 14th century, killing between 1/3 and 1/2 of the continent's entire population, an estimated 25 million people. Outbreaks of the plague continued to be a common occurrence in Europe until the 18th century. Today, however, 90% of cases occur in Africa, primarily in Madagascar, Zambia, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. According to the World Health Organization, last year, Madagascar saw nearly 260 reported cases with 60 deaths, more than any other country in the world. Public health experts have warned that conditions in Madagascar are ripe for a full-blown epidemic unless the country takes measures to prevent the proliferation of the illness. Christophe Rogier of the Pasteur Institute, an institution that researches infectious diseases, told the BBC, "If the plague gets into prisons, there could be a sort of atomic explosion of the plague within the town. The prison walls will never prevent the plague from getting out and invading the rest of the town." The bubonic plague kills up to 2/3 of its sufferers within 4 days if left untreated. The administration of antibiotics within 24 hours of infection has generally proven to be effective in fighting the disease, but in rural Madagascar, residents often lack access to basic health care and are sometimes ashamed to pursue treatment. And with 92% of the population of 22.5 million people living on only $2 a day, Madagascar is one of the world's poorest countries. What all of this means is that it is difficult to tell what measures the country can afford to take to combat the Black Death. In the meantime, the Red Cross and the Pasteur Institute are working to eradicate the disease by disinfecting prisons, spraying insecticides, distributing hygiene products, and setting rodent traps. On an island where the political regime is an outcast and where there are serious questions about feeding the poverty-riddled population, the Black Death pushes Madagascar even closer to the status of failed state. On the continent where humanity took its very first steps, the island nation will be facing one of its oldest nemesis. This is Amanda Coletta
and Nick D'Agostino
signing off for this episode. Thank you for being part of the global conversation. Next, we bring you an interview by Ali McHugh with Master of Global Affairs student Martina Taverna discussing nonviolent resistance in Palestine.
Today I'm talking with Martina Taverna. Martina is in the first year of the Munk program, and in 2011 she spent the summer in Palestine working with the Student Forum Institute. While working there, she designed an anti-discrimination campaign for the forum and participated in nonviolent resistance in West Bank. So thank you for joining us today, Martina.
Thank you for having me.
So what were the main goals of the SFI?
The project that I was working on was an anti-discrimination campaign. The main goal was not based on discrimination against Israelis or Jewish people. It had really nothing to do with Israel at all. It was looking inside the country at discrimination from Palestinian to Palestinian. So we looked at what we could do to engage in dialogue with youth and get the community involved. One of the ways that they involve youth in non-violent forms of resistance is by having them express themselves through other mediums, by art or music or dance, theater, things like that. One of our ways that we were going to encourage youth to participate was through graffiti and designing the logo and putting it up on walls so people could recognize the logo and kind of create that dialogue about discrimination and about the issues, the social issues that were in Palestine.
Is the younger generation very politically active within Palestine?
Yeah, it's like a trigger word there. You hear it often, nonviolent resistance. And you see it in many different forms by the weekly protests. You see a lot of younger people there and putting on, like I was saying, productions, creating music, and just trying to get the word out.
Did any of these nonviolent forms of resistance ever turn violent?
Not that I was at, thankfully. But we were forewarned before going to these protests that it does happen sometimes. So we were told before leaving that we should bring bags of onion. And I've never heard of this, I had no idea. But when they throw the tear gas into the crowds, you can't breathe. So by smelling the onion, you remind yourself to breathe again. So that was really interesting to me. So here I am with my onion and my scarf and whatnot, and we're going out to this protest. But one of the stories that I recently heard was there was a young boy, I guess he was in his 20s, young 20s, and he was hit in the chest and killed by one of these tear gas canisters. So his mother actually collected these canisters and created a garden by planting flowers in the canisters. And it was a pretty powerful thing to say, you've done this, but this is how we're going to react, is through a peaceful means.
All right, well, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and tell us about your experience in Palestine.
Thank you. I really enjoyed talking about it.
Next, we bring you an interview by Seher Shafiq with Ali Alfoneh on Iran's nuclear weapons program.
Hello everyone, I'm here with Ali Alfoneh, who is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Ali, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
So Ali is considered an expert on the issue of Iran's nuclear weapons program. So let's just start with the very first question. Is Iran's nuclear program an issue of concern, and why is it?
Spread of weapons of mass destruction, of course, is a source of concern internationally, but it's particularly true when it comes to the Islamic Republic of Iran, a revolutionary regime which is bound to disturb the status quo in the region. a regime which believes that it is called upon to export its revolution in the Middle East region, and is also likely to use the nuclear weapons as a protective shield for its revolutionary activities in the region. And that, of course, should be a source of concern, not only for the United States and Canada, but particularly for Iran's neighbors.
Let me ask you about the recent change in the Iranian administration. In negotiations, personalities often play a strong role, as I'm sure you're well aware, in the outcome of a deal. The new regime under Rouhani has arguably been more intent on negotiating a deal with the West. But the question is that intention realistic enough to negotiate a deal that satisfies all parties? And is Rouhani a reformist?
Well, to answer the last question first, I don't see President Rouhani as a reformist, and President Rouhani has not tried to present himself to the Iranian public as a reformist. He made a sole promise to the Iranian voters, and it was to improve their living standards by the means of providing sanction relief. That was the only promise that he made. He never promised to liberalize the political or economic system in Iran. So no, I certainly do not see President Rouhani as a reformist. But when it comes to President Rouhani as a negotiator, I also must say that I have my doubts when it comes to optimism and the outcome of the negotiations. President Rouhani is well known from previous negotiations, and he also has written his nuclear memoirs. He has made several very important speeches commenting on his past record as a nuclear negotiator. And one of the issues that he consistently mentions in Persian language media and speeches is that the purpose of his negotiations with the West was to buy time, not to necessarily dismantle the nuclear program. So I see that President Rouhani may pursue a different tactic than his predecessor in office, President Ahmadinejad. But when it comes to the strategic goal, I'm not so sure. Another issue which is also very important to mention is that President Rouhani is not the final decision maker in Iran. There are a number of institutions and individuals who are involved in policy making and decision making, and President Rouhani has not the final say. One also needs to pay attention to the interests of the Supreme Leader Khamenei. One needs to pay attention to signals being sent by the engine of Iran's nuclear program, which is the Revolutionary Guard Corps. So having too high hopes, those people are bound to be disappointed.
Very interesting. We could talk about this forever, but unfortunately we are running out of time. So Ali, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very, very much for the opportunity you gave me.
You've been listening to Global Conversations, produced by students in the Masters of Global Affairs program at the Munk School of Global Affairs. The executive producer of Global Conversations is Michelle Park, senior producer Nathaniel Dove, and assistant producer Cassandra Cow. We'd like to thank our analyst Ishita Guptan. Staff appearing in this episode are Amanda Coletta, Ali McHugh, Seher Shafiq, and myself, Nick D'Agostino. A special thank you to guests Martina Taverna and Ali Alfoneh.